if you want to make some sick Skrilla, come over to North America, where organizations are passing out salaries like Halloween candy. Don't worry, most of them are brand new organizations to the scene and they have no clue about the competitive landscape. You'll fit right in. Don't waste your time in Asia, where the women are beautiful, true, but the Counter-Strike Skrilla is weak and very, very hard to come by. All right, enough of that. It actually is pretty hot in my room, so they say imitation is the greatest form of flattery, so I love you, Duncan. All right, in all seriousness, I wanted to talk about Taipei. This video has been a long time coming. I've been wrecked coming back. But this is the event that just occurred last weekend. It doubled as the Valve Minor for Asia. It was also the qualifier for IEM Katowice, where the top two teams, so Renegades and Mongolz, are both going to be at the MLG qualifier for the major at the end of February in about 3 weeks. And then Mongolz, being the champions of Taipei, they will be headed to Katowice. So congratulations to both those guys. But before we get into too much, I wanted to really quick just thank two guys. I'm going to put their Twitter accounts in the info of this video, Wooly and PeetyG. They're two analysts from the Oceanic region from Australia. They helped me prepare a lot, gave me a lot of cool insight, specifically into Chiefs and Renegades, obviously. So thanks, guys, for letting me use your insight and making me sound smart on the desk. All right, so real quick, general thoughts about just the Asian teams, the players, the scene. It's a very starved scene. Preparing for this event was very difficult because there's not a lot of information. A lot of these teams didn't even have HLTV pages. It was really, really hard, searching for sites where they had any kind of statistics on who's some of the best players to watch in terms of, ratings and kill death and all things like that. Very hard to even find the Twitch channels that these qualifiers were streamed on. I couldn't find any demos from the online qualifiers. The teams had to play in online qualifiers in like sub-regions to even make it to IEM Taipei. And even some of those demos were just like not uploaded anywhere. So that's one thing that right off the back can just help this scene is just having more access to information. I'm sure they have some of their own websites that they go to that have some info, but I mean, translating and finding out what they were, it was a big challenge, at least for me and some of the people that I asked for help on it. Many of these teams are like the dominant teams in their region, except it's hard to really quantify that on a world scale, obviously, because you don't really know how good their opponents are. You don't, like, once again, just lack of information, lack of demos to watch. So teams like Risky Gaming, MVP Carnal, two teams who were in Group A. I mean, they showed some individual talent as a team. They struggled at times to put things together, especially going up against CyberZen, Renegades, these more experienced teams. Even Chiefs, who, although they're not experienced as a team, they were mostly just a pug, just have more experience playing against better opponents. But with that individual skill, they showed improvement as a team throughout the tournament. I mean, for most of these players and teams, it was their first time on a stage, first time on an event that had this significant prize at the end of it, which is qualifying for these events. It's the money as well. Risky Gaming in general, or I mean, especially we're night and day from their first match to their last match. Even able to upset, you would call it, MVP Carnal. But situationals especially showed off some inexperience. Showed off you could really tell when communication was getting hectic, when players were feeling the pressure. But it was cool to see these teams improve just by playing two to three matches on the stage, getting very used to that pressure. And then moving forward, you look at teams like Mongolz and CyberZen, who had two completely different styles of playing. But one thing, the stars of even some of the teams who didn't make it out of group, one thing Anders Semler, DDK Vendetta, all of us noticed was that these Asian players have very good mechanics, especially for lack of experience. Their style of aiming seemed to be very, very different. When you watch like the top Europeans and North Americans play, it's like very smooth mouse movement. You can see their aiming is almost anticipation. When we were here in Asian, like guys like Machine, Zilkenberg, Savage, their aim is more kind of like, they're not really like trying to pre-fire or pre-hold an angle. It's just kind of like, oh, you show up on their screen, we're going to snap to you and get a headshot. It was really, really cool to watch. It makes for some very, very impressive rounds. So that was really cool. And then just the players themselves. I mean, everyone who was involved, even the casters, the Chinese casters we had there, everyone is so humble, so very kind. I mean, watch the interview with Machinegun that Semler did from IEM. You can see he's just happy to be competing at an event. Obviously, qualifying and winning it helps a lot. But it was never any kind of bragging, never kind of like self-confidence in it. It was just all smiles. Even the teams at the event, whether it was after their matches immediately or whether it was back at the hotel room when we were having a couple beers at the end of the day, all these guys, MVP Carnal, Risky Gaming, these guys all came up to us, Anders, Semler, myself, DDK, Vendetta, and they were saying, what did you see out of us? Where can we improve? How do we improve? What did we do wrong? Like, give us some things to work with. They all wanted to get better, and they were all asking, when are we going to get European teams to Asia? When are we going to start seeing the best teams in the world? We want to go up against these guys. We want to learn from the best. So it was really really awesome to see that kind of dedication from a scene that's very, very starved. I had heard a lot moving into this event from people in the community I respect, not even just in Counter Strike, but in other games as well. Talk about how Koreans, even in other esports, or I mean, just Asians in general, not just Koreans, but Asians in general, have just this work ethic into esports where it's very, very impressive, and that's how they're able to improve so quickly. And it was really cool, really amazing experience to see that firsthand. So, um, real quick about Tyloo as well. I don't want to stick too much on this topic because it's a little, little rough. But I mean, if for those of you who don't know who weren't paying attention the other weekend, they got banned or disqualified from the tournament because they have a player who has a VAC ban on his account, um, or on another account. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'm sure they're going to be disputing it. Hopefully, they can get that figured out and situated and move on one way or the other. But it was a big bummer. I know a lot of the teams, most of the analysts knew that Tyloo was going to be a very, very tough team to play against. They were favorites for a lot of people into this tournament. So it was really disappointing that we didn't get to see them play. Especially, I mean, there's another universe here where Renegades just gets bodied out of the group stage. Renegades had a very poor first day, and you got to imagine if they were playing against Tyloo, who they knew was going to be a tough opponent, if Tyloo came to play the way that everyone said they would, Renegades might not even be getting out of group stage. So hopefully they get that figured out. And then the Australians of Chiefs. Let's talk about these guys because they were very similar situation to most of the Asian teams who were in attendance there, in that they have a lot of young talent, a lot of up and coming talent. Not a lot of experience. I mean, they used Top Gun as a ringer, first of all. This was basically like a glorified pug. They had two stand ins. Top Gun was one of them, and I believe the other one was Burn. Top Gun was the only person on this team who had played in an event outside of Australia. I mean, none of them had even played internationally. So not only that, but they're on a stage playing for money, playing for qualifiers. So kind of same situation as most of the Asian teams. They had two ringers because one of their members had passport issues, and the other one, oddly enough, has a VAC band account. So they'll have to get that straightened out as well. And that, as far as I know, I don't know what the deal is going to be with it. I know he still has an ESL ban, which is why he couldn't come here. So they should, if you guys are watching this, clear it up with Valve before you go to the next minor or major or whatever you guys are trying to do. Um, but funny story, crazy Australians. The first night we were there, everyone was hanging out, having some beers. We didn't really hang out with the Chiefs guys, but woke up the next morning and heard that they had, like, two of their members had gotten a little bit of a fight. Like, someone had just punched one of the other players. So right off the bat, there's this like crazy drama. But true to Australian form, they seemed buddy buddy the next day. There didn't seem to be any kind of turmoil or issues, especially when they're on stage. There was no kind of situation where we thought that they were having a tough time getting along together. It blew over really, really quickly. Um, and it was pretty cool watching them. Burn was I thought was very impressive for his first event, and he lived up to the hype that I had been given by by Wooly and PeetyG about how talented he is for how young, and how I think he's only been in the scene maybe down there. I believe he's the one that's only been around for like a year and at the top level for like 6 months at that. So, I mean, him and Zewsy were very, very impressive. They played a very loose style as a team. Granted, they were a pug, so I mean, there wasn't any like crazy set execution or tactics or anything like that. And on that note, I mean, Lightstep as an in-game leader, I was reasonably impressed with. Like, didn't blow me away with anything, but the fact that he was able to kind of harness this, this pug basically, into having a pretty good run at this tournament. Even challenging Mongols to get to the finals was really, really cool. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if you see Burn, if you see zewsy, maybe one of these other guys on the team, either join, Immunity, who's the second best team, or Renegades, who is obviously the first best Australian team, in the near future. It'll be a little bit tough. I know there's rumors about that circulating, those two teams going through some changes, but I know Renegades, now that they've played the minor with this lineup, they have to play the major qualifier. So, I mean, I don't know if it's going to happen, but if it does, it won't be at least for another month. CyberZen, Chinese team. This was the team who actually um, challenged FaZe, who had a really good showing against FaZe at one of the previous tournament. I want to say it was Star Ladder, but Star Ladder and Leipzig kind of meld together for me just because of all the crazy events. I've been to a couple events and I know there's a lot every weekend, so it all kind of blends together at this point. But one of those events, it was they challenged FaZe very, very well, and all the talk after that event was how CyberZen had this crazy preparation, how they had really good nade usage, flashbangs and smokes were confusing FaZe, things they hadn't seen. They didn't really know where the attack was going to be coming, so CyberZen was impressed a lot of people in that way, and the use of those nades really neutralized a lot of the advantage that FaZe had in just raw skill. Um, they were kind of a big disappointment for me at this event because I was really hyped up to watch them play. Um, that kind of play, that kind of style works really, really well against teams like FaZe who just depend on their skill. And then they went up against, I mean, and this is the thing too. So they went up against Chiefs in the group stage, and Chiefs, being a pug, had to play with a lot of emphasis on their skill, and they got crushed 16-4. CyberZen beat the hell out of them. So then they went against Renegades in a best of three, and just got demolished. Renegades just kind of outplayed them entirely. It wasn't even a win based off skill; it was a win based off tactics. CyberZen never really was into it. They couldn't adjust. They couldn't get a good read on what was happening from Renegades. So I mean, that's just kind of more experience for them, right? Like that style they had can beat those skilled teams, teams that are going to rely on individual talent and performance. And against some a little bit more structure, they really struggled. So they relied a lot on Savage, who didn't have an amazing event. He had some good rounds. He had some really good halves or maps, but tournament overall wasn't that explosive player that he was getting hyped up to be. Maybe it was just a bad event for him. But a lot of people picked them as favorites, and I didn't really see anything out of them that made me think that they were going to be favorites of this tournament. Even on the first day, they had a really sketchy opening match against Risky Gaming from UAE. So hopefully next showing for them will be better. And then Renegades. Let's start with the good with these guys. First of all, I want to dispel the idea. I know that I've seen a couple comments and I've seen a general idea of people thinking that Renegades aren't putting in work, that Sponge isn't putting in work as an in-game leader, and that's not true. Uh, even just at this event, Sponge at least was inhaling demos and VODs, preparing for these matches. He put together a sick game plan for CyberZen. If you go back and watch that best of three series they had, you can see Renegades just outplays them strategically from start to finish of both maps. So that was a really, really cool series they played. They came into this event and they looked much more structured. They had fantastic uses of nades during their executions. Even during anti-ecos, they made sure they always had their Molotovs, flushing out positions, making sure they weren't going to get screwed by someone in a really weird position that is hard to check when you're trying to take over a bomb site. So all that was good stuff. Um, Guys like Azur and JKS, which was really cool to see JKS show up in a big way, carried them through stretches. Both of those guys, Azur especially, I remember having very, very good matches. But both of them, well, JKS didn't go a single map sub 1.0 rating from HLTV, and Azur only went one map in the whole tournament with sub 1.0, and that was the Grand Finals Inferno map where the whole team just got smacked around. So those two guys in my mind coming into this event were always the ones, Azur especially, JKS, who's kind of been, hit or miss. Those are the two guys I want to see carrying that team, having the big numbers. So it was good to see them at this event show up in a really big way. The bad news is that they have massive consistency issues. They showed up on the first day and looked like crap. They got beat up by Mongolz. The scoreline says it was 13-16, but there was actually the first half was 4-11. So you never felt like Renegades was even in that map. But they got crushed basically. And for all the prep that they'd done, for all the work and everything like that, it just seemed like there was a really uh, a lack of adjustment in mid-match period to kind of figure out how to counter Mongol's play. That hyper aggressive style, the style of just taking fights, really confused this Renegades lineup. And even they admitted to it that was a really weird style for them to get used to, a really weird style for them to compete with, and they never figured it out. Mongols beat them on 3 maps throughout the event. And it just, that the disciplined style that they were coming in with, the structure, just kind of got broken up by the Mongolians. Um, I mean, this watching Renegades play at the event, it's really weird because I've always had this feeling that, um, as much as Azur, JKS, even Yam are like the three you want to be the carries and everything, and those are like the really skilled players. Havoc as well as a skilled player, but he's the one who I always felt like when Renegades is impressive and when they win and then when they have good maps against really good teams, Havoc is the one who shows up, despite all the skill on the other 3, 4 players. Um, and I mean, they kind of like bleed. Their heart beats as Havoc goes. So when he didn't have a lot of success, they kind of struggled. I mean, even against a team like Ichu Alive, which is a Taiwanese team who got knocked out in two matches basically. Um, it's a team they should just be able to flat out steamroll, right? Right? I mean, this is a team without experience. We don't know any of the players. Renegades coming in with all this talent. The thing about Renegades is they never seem to want to do that. They never seem to have the confidence that they can just come into a match, outskill, and just crush their opponent. When you watch a European team play against opponents that they should never lose to, that they outclass on so many different levels, you can see them just body their opponents. They're just like, all right, let's just get this one over with. You see them come in and play with no respect, forcing the opponent to make them respect them, and it either works or it doesn't. But the Europeans more often than not just crush them, and Renegades as a team just doesn't seem to want to do that. They don't have the individual confidence to kind of just go freewheeling like that and just kind of and no respect people. And the general idea I have as to why that is just comes down to you look at the players they have on this team. I mean, Havoc, while he doesn't put up the big numbers anymore, he's been the carry on his teams, from what I've been told by the Australian guys. He's been the carries on all of his teams for years and years. So that's like kind of the role that he's always played, and that's what he knows. That's what he knows to do, how he knows how to play. Yam was like the hard carry impact player for. Immunity, and then Renegade snatched him. Now they have Azur and JKS who are doing that kind of same role. They're actually doing it currently in the present for Renegade. So you have these 4 players who all of a sudden are having to adjust, not necessarily to completely different roles, but they're having to do things that they haven't had to do in the past. They're having to have to play more supportive roles at times. And because of that, they're so devoted to that kind of mindset and that structure that it's hard. Well, in my opinion, I think it's hard for them to kind of break out of that shell when they're focusing so much on the strategies they've practiced, focusing so much on executing this new style, this new role that they have to fit into. It's hard for them to transfer immediately out of it and just go into their old, let's just go frag, let's just go kill something. Um, and I think that might just be a big issue in their consistency because you see when matches start out and everything they're doing is working, they generally play much better. But when they get hit in the mouth early, when they get hit in the mouth and like something that they prepared for this match doesn't have success, then all of a sudden they've got to adjust, and it's hard for those players to kind of switch and adjust mid-match. Um, like even against Mongols in the grand finals, it's hard to watch because they have this structured style, and it was just getting savaged by the Mongolians for quite a while. And I almost wanted to like call a timeout myself and like run up there and just be like, yo, like stop, like just go frag out, just go, you know, unleash your skill. Let's see it. Go up against them, go toe to toe with them, and trust the experience that you have that they don't to win you out in the mid and late rounds in the situationals, the post plants. But stop letting these guys just body you around in the opening stages. Like Machinegun was just taking fights wherever he wanted. Um, you know, and that was really hard for them to deal with. And then you look at the style that Chiefs had as a pug, where they had to rely on that skill and they had to take these battles because they don't have the communication, they don't have the set plan that Renegades had. That was much more effective against Mongols. They took a map off of them in a best of three. They had a couple close maps with them. I think it was like 16-10, both of them, 16-9, 16-10 maybe. And I think having a little bit more of that falling back on that individual skill, having more reliance and more confidence in your players as individuals, I think that could have really, really helped Renegades, and we just didn't see it in any of those matches against Mongols. Um, Speaking of the Mongols, they won the entire event. Very impressive team. Complete opposite of what I just talked about with Renegades. Not very structured, and that's kind of what we expected going into this. That they were just going to be this skilled team who was going to bully and trade their way into bomb sites. There wasn't going to be a lot of finesse to it. They just wanted, even watching some of the matches. There was a best of three they played against CyberZen the week before IEM that I watched, and they basically telegraphed everywhere they were going to go. They would just sit outside of a bomb site for the entire round. You knew which bomb site they would hit at the end. They would have four people there and one watching the flank, and eventually they would just work their way into the site. Um, and that's kind of how they started out in this tournament. The opening day in the group stages, it was the Machinegun and the Zilkenberg show. Those two guys were absolutely insane. Machinegun, you guys heard a lot of talk about him. He was actually known, from what I've been told in the region, as being a little bit of an onliner. A lot of people in the region thought he cheated, um, and he came into this event and just destroyed everyone. He ended the event with a 1.37 rating. That was the highest that was there. Zilkenberg was the 1-2 punch. Zilkenberg ended with 1.30. So you have Machinegun, this crazy aggressive, sick aim, just like a dominant force, just a volume fragger, going nuts. And you had Zilkenberg, who's also the opper, who was just kind of exerting his will across the map. Very smart how he played with the op for being for being on a team that's so inexperienced with international competition. Very mobile with it on the CT sides, switching up his position. Um, he also has a sick USP, by the way, Zilkenberg. He bailed him out of a lot of CT pistol rounds, so that was really cool to watch. But we were all thrown off by how well those two looked in the early stages of the tournament. But little did we know, like all the other Asian teams who improved over the course of their three matches in the group stage, Mongols improved in a massive way from day one to the grand finals. The form they came into the grand finals was really, really surprising. Kabul was a map that Renegades, I can't remember if it was Renegades pick, but it's a map that they feel very comfortable on. It's a map that they like playing. Machinegun actually didn't show up at all into it. Machinegun was having a big off game. Um, and normally, like we always thought, if Machine has an off game in this tournament, like these guys aren't going to win. But everyone else showed up. I mean, Sogu, Menace, Zilkenberg all had +1 rating in that matchup. Sogu was a beast. Menace had some very big impact rounds in that first map of the grand finals. But it was kind of the way that they were doing things for an inexperienced team, for a team that we hadn't seen of yet. Um, they were supporting their players really, really well, whether it be, flashbangs or Molotov from one player that forced, one of the Renegades defenders out of position, and that exposed him to a one-on-one battle. It wasn't just taking fights, it's how they found those one-on-one fights. That was really impressive. So that was good stuff out of them. All across the map, they had good map control. They knew how to manipulate it. They knew how to get a pick and kind of slow things down and work from there. But once they took the site, it was just kind of like, once they decided to take a bomb site, it was just all in. Really cool, really decisive play style. And actually, this is a good time to talk about probably the most badass storyline that came out of IEM Taipei is the Mongols. But more specifically, it's that the Mongols actually paid their own way to move the entire team over to Vietnam. And I mean, we obviously saw Renegades do that, moving to the States from Australia. We saw Luminosity, the Brazilians, do the same thing, moving to the States. But this is like, these guys paid to move within their own region, which is a very depleted, very starved region that doesn't get a lot of attention, that nobody really knows, that doesn't get a lot of tournaments. They just moved to Vietnam just to get better pings. They just didn't have the pings that it took to compete and to practice against the other top teams in the region. So they're not even trying to get to these other regions that have, they're not trying to get to Europe where it has the best teams to go up against the best teams. They're just like, we just want the pings. So they did that, and I mean, it showed. Like, they worked really, really hard. Very impressive team. And that's just a sick storyline, and I hope that they get some more opportunities in the future. If there's any organizations out there looking for a team, check these guys out. Um, like I said, they were also some of the guys that we talked to that was very surprising how humble and how willing to work hard they are, to improve in that capacity. Is very, very impressive. But what did I have next to talk about? Oh, um, I mean, yeah, these were the guys, the Mongols, who asked specifically for Europeans. They asked me, they were like, are there going to be more ESL events here in Asia? Are there Europeans going to show up? I was like, I don't know, but they want to go against the best teams in the world, and they're going to have a chance now because of how well they played at this event. So, I mean, mark your calendars for the major qualifiers in 3 weeks at the end of this month. They're going to be there. I fully expect them to qualify for the major. I fully expect them to be one of the top 8 teams at the major qualifier, and then definitely check them out at Katowice because that'll be another opportunity that they'll have to go against the best in the world. Now, how are they going to actually do when they face these teams? I imagine their first showing against a top tip team, they're going to get pretty beat up, pretty roughed up. I mean, they have the skill in Machinegun and Zilkenberg, definitely, but against these top 10 teams, you need all 5 players to be effective. And we only really saw that in the grand finals. Sometimes they had, these other players had good rounds, had good, a couple impact kills and rounds here or there, but putting together a full match from someone who wasn't Machine Gun and Zilkenberg didn't really happen until the last day. Um, and everyone's going to have to do that. They did show a weakness on a map like Inferno, where the skill of Machine Gun can get delayed and like quarantined basically by smokes and Molotovs in these choke points. They could hold him back. He couldn't find, his entries weren't as clean, they weren't as frequent. Same thing with Zilkenberg with that AWP. Inferno's a very hard map for an opera to work. And he also got blocked out a little bit on the T sides, especially. And then they kind of destroyed like these passive setups, but they struggled very much against, well, maybe not very much, but they struggled against Chiefs, who's not like this high level team. They have some skill, but not to the level of some of the top 10 teams we see. But they struggled very much going against a very similar play style to their own. In that, those aggressive peaks, that aggressive play, individual play. I got to imagine if they go up against a Fnatic, they're just going to get mauled. I can imagine Envy doing the same thing, kind of, with the way they play. So, I mean, but the way that they improved throughout the tournament, the way they improved just in the kind of that isolated region, and just talking to the guys, you can tell that any kind of experience they get against top 10 teams, they're going to learn from it and they're going to build on it. So very, very promising. I mean, even CyberZen, while I was disappointed, showed some good stuff, and as long as they can improve, that'll be fun to see them in the future. And just overall, the Asian region was just very impressive, and some of these teams and how willing they are to work hard. So very, very promising region. But Mongols, man, put them in the calendar. Try and find their next match. They're a fun team to watch. Exciting play style. And they're going to be a scary team to go against at the qualifier. So hopefully teams don't overlook them. And we'll have to see how they do. So thanks for watching, guys. And I should have another video coming out this week. I know I took a little bit of a week off with all the traveling and everything like that, but I'll get back on schedule this week. And thanks.